when there were the followers of Muawiyah and the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And then it really went on to become Sunnis and Shias. Because at the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, there was no use of Shia. The followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib did not intend to make a sect called Shia. It's the people later on who created sects. And then, that was early in the history of Islam. They started to break along these lines. Then came, this is number 4, then came certain scholars who found that there was a very important need to help people understand the Quran and the Sunnah. So there came Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i and Malik and Ahmad. And they started to explain to people, because of their depth of knowledge, they started to explain to people, and people who needed someone to be their leader, their guide, because of geographical distances, they ended up with schools of thought because they didn't have what we have today. You make an email instantaneously, it's on the other end of the world. At that time, if Imam Shafi'i had to make sure that one person in the sanad of the hadith is authentic, he had to travel for months to get to a certain person who is an authority on that particular hadith to know whether that person is really telling the truth or not. They had no telephones. They had no television to see anything. So people who were in Hijaz ended up studying the school of Imam Malik of Medina. People in Iraq studied the school of Imam Abu Hanifa. People in Egypt studied the school of Imam al-Shafi'i, and so on and so forth, because of these things. And these Imams themselves said to the people, you should not follow our interpretations blindly. You should understand our hujjah first. You should know our dalil. You should know the proof that we went by. We don't want you to just follow us blindly. And one thing, I can mention many examples, but I'll tell you one example. That when Imam Malik was commissioned by Harun al-Rashid to put together Muwatta ibn Malik as a reference on Islam, he wrote it. After that, Harun al-Rashid, the Abbasi caliph, told Malik that now that the work is finished, I am going to send my instructions to all parts of the Islamic State. And by that time, it had reached North Africa, it had reached China, it had reached large areas. He said, now my instructions to all the Muslims to burn every other source, and that your interpretation will be the reference that will be adopted by the Islamic State. Now, if it were happening in these days, Imam Malik would have been happy and say, you know, I'll get the honor, and now I will be the Imam of the Islamic State. But Imam Malik begged Harun, he said, don't do it, because this is contrary to the spirit of Islam. I did not write Al-Muwatta because I wanted to be the sole interpreter, because I may be wrong. I just followed my own rules that I put. The same as Bukhari, Imam Bukhari, when he put together his Sahih, before he started to put it, he said, I am going to make for myself certain rules that I will go by. But one of those rules that I put may be the wrong one, and I will end up putting a hadith as Sahih when it is not Sahih. But nowadays, people, just they hear something, and they are not prepared because they don't have the minimum Islamic requirements. They are not prepared to accept anyone who is different. So we cannot peacefully coexist with each other, let alone coexisting with non-Muslims. Let us talk about Muslims coexisting peacefully together. We are finding difficulty with that. I was visiting Trinidad last year, and it was one of the most enjoyable trips of my life, alhamdulillah. But it was saddening to find out that in a small country like Trinidad, there were 36 Islamic organizations that are pulling in different directions. We sat together, alhamdulillah, by the end of the trip, and we put together a plan. But with plans on paper, you cannot really achieve lots if you do not follow up with practical steps. There's lots to be done. We have to get unified. It's a real challenge for our youth as they are heading to the new century, as they are facing many challenges. It is a real challenge to get them united before we depart. And you know, sometimes human beings can do well by learning from animals. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be impolite. This is not the intention.